In this video, we'll be reviewing Unit 4 for Latin for Americans. The future of the verb sum is also irregular, using the stem ero and then having the endings o, is, it, imus, itus, unt. You may recognize these from the first and second conjugation future with the bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitus, bunt. For the perfect, you take the third principal part and then the regular perfect endings. Remember, the perfect is the same for all conjugations, even irregular ones. Notice here where we have the o, is, it, imus, itus, unt, and then the future is the same, the perfect is the same for all conjugations. You take that third principal part of sum, which is fui, and it's I, isti, it, imus, istus, erunt. The infinitive can be used as a subject of a sentence or as a direct object. Anytime you use a verb as a noun or a verbal noun, it's always going to be neuter and singular. In the following sentence, to praise teachers is good. The verb to praise in the infinitive form is acting as the subject of this sentence. It takes its own direct object, teachers, which would be in the accusative case. And notice here, the adjective bonum is neuter singular, agreeing with teachers, because it's neuter singular. In this sentence, I ought to write a letter. Here, the infinitive write is acting as an object. So I ought to write is acting as a direct object, and then letters is a direct object of that direct object. Here are some more examples of an infinitive used as a subject. Remember, the infinitive does not decline, and it's always singular and neuter. So again, to err is human. The infinitive to err is the subject of the sentence. To have friends is pleasing. To have is the subject of the sentence. The simple sentence is to have is pleasing. And then we have friends, which is the accusative of to have, the subject. And here you have an infinitive acting as a predicate nominative. To see is to believe. So to see is the subject of the sentence. To believe is acting as the predicate nominative. And here's an example of an infinitive used as an object. So he prepares to free, and to free is actually the object of the verb prepares. And if you noticed, when infinitives are used as a subject or an object, they can take their own objects after them. And so slaves are what are being freed. And so prepares is technically the object, or to free is technically the object of prepares. The slaves is technically the object of the infinitive to free. Apposition is merely adds new information about a noun. I also say it's a way to rename a noun. When you're using a positive, it will be in the same case as the noun you're renaming. So in the examples here, I had a true friend, Marcus. I'm renaming the true friend, Marcus, or giving more information. And notice both true friend and Marcus are in the accusative singular. Rome, a town of Italy, was beautiful. So Rome is being renamed a town of Italy was beautiful. Notice how they are both nominative singular. Their endings are different because Roma is feminine and oppidum is neuter. Notice that they are both nominative singular though. They don't have to agree, they just have to have the same case. When we ask questions in Latin, we use the indicative mood, which is the normal mood that we use for making statements, so that shouldn't be anything that different. You can either start with a question word like cur, ubi, quis, quid, which are called interrogatives, or you can make a statement to a question by adding this eclectic ne at the end of the first word. That makes a statement into a question. If you expect a yes answer, you can begin with none. Also, if you expect a no answer, you can start with num. So here are some examples. Who is leading? This question is introduced with the interrogative pronoun quis. That lets you know it's a question. The next one, are you doing your public duty? This ne at the beginning of the first word lets you know this is a question. If the ne was not there, it would simply read, you are doing your public duty. And then this last one with a none, we're going to expect a yes answer here. Your master is fair, isn't he? Or isn't your master fair? Now we're going to introduce the third conjugation. We've learned the first conjugation that has the principal part are, the second conjugation which has the second principal part docere, and now the third conjugation will also have the third principal part ponere, except in the first principal part it'll be pono ponere. This is how the third conjugation conjugates in the present tense. It goes ponis, and then the stem becomes an I. So it goes pono, ponis, ponit, ponimus, podit, ponitus, ponunt. And so that o, is, it, imus, itus, unt pattern is something that you can remember because you've already learned that pattern when you learn the first and second conjugation future, as well as the future of the verb to be, sum. In the imperative, it's a little tricky. It's pone with an e, but in the plural, it's ponaite with an I there. So the imperative for the third can be a little tricky. The perfect is my favorite tense because it's the same for all conjugations, even irregulars. All you do is you take the third principal part, and for pono it's posui, and then you add your perfect endings. I, isti, it, imus, istis, erunt. For the third and fourth conjugation, they are both very similar to the third. So except you have an I in all the forms. So when you conjugate in both the third and the fourth conjugation in the present, they will conjugate exactly the same way. It's io, and then it's just it, imus, itis, and then iunt. So the only difference in conjugating the third io conjugation and the fourth is that I at the beginning and at the end. The imperative for the third conjugation, third io conjugation, is exactly the same as the third. It's an e and an ite. However, for the fourth, it's ite for the imperatives. There is one common irregular imperative for the third io, and that's facio. The imperative of facio is just fac. It's not face. The perfect tense is regular, and you just take the third principal part, and for capio it's capi, and for munio it's muniwi, and then it follows the same pattern that you would expect for all perfect tense verbs. To review the conjugations, there are 5 of them. The first conjugation is o, are for the infinitive. The second is eo for the first principal part, ere. The third is just o, ere. The third io conjugation is io, ere, and the fourth is io, ire. Now we're going to review the nouns from this unit. So remember, anything that ends in us is most likely I masculine. Here's a couple exceptions. Is locus becomes loca aurum neuter when it's plural. And arma is armorum neuter. It's a neuter plural. But other than that, all these nouns should be regular. The us's would be I masculine, the ums would be I neuter, and then the a's would be ae feminine. Nothing special here with these adjectives. They're just us, Use the us and use the second declension masculine for masculine nouns. The which you use the first declension for feminine noun, and the use the second declension neuter for neuter nouns. Pulcher and wester are adjectives that end in er, but that shouldn't throw you. You'll just use the er for the masculine, an for the feminine, and an for the neuter. In both these cases, the e will drop away when you decline them. Now identifying verbs is a little more tricky because it's hard to tell between the first and the third. So the easy ones to figure out is anything that ends in eo will be a second conjugation, and they'll follow those patterns. Your ios, you have to think, are they third io or fourth? And so I always remember the fourths. So wenio, inwenio, munio, these would all be fourth conjugation. Then I'll look at my other ios, capio, efficio, acepio, and so forth. These all will be third io. And then the other o's is the tough one. I have to decide if it's first or third. So a kiddo excedo, defendo, duco, excedo, pono, rego, and mitto. These are all third. And then the remaining, ago is also third, excuse me. That should be third. And then maturo, expecto, and naro would be first. And then lastly, you have your pronouns, quis, which is who, quid, which is what, and your adverb ubi, which is where, when, and the enclectic ne. When you add to the end of the first word of a sentence, you make a statement into a question.